Hi, my name is Dustin Starkey, and today I will be giving you my informative speech. I'd like to introduce my audience.
Hi, I'm Amber.
Today I'll be informing you about the history of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, also known as the UFC. I'll be telling you about how the Ultimate Fighting Championship started, some of the controversies it went through in the late 1990s and early 2000s, and the status of the UFC today. In 1990, there was a family called the Gracie family, headed up by Rory and Gracie. They are from Brazil and considered some of the best mixed martial artists in the world. They specialized in what was known as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it was their own style, and they thought it was the best fighting style in the world, and that nothing was better than that. So what they set out to do was to prove to the world that their style could be any other style. So they went around to pay-per-view producers and everybody trying to set up a fight so that they could show they could beat anybody. They wanted to set up an 8-man tournament. As they were looking for these producers, they kept getting shut down, and no one wanted to help them. Eventually, they came across SEG Productions, and they thought this was very interesting. They had done boxing and other things of that sort as their pay-per-views, and they were looking to expand their empire. So they decided to go ahead and do it. And what they set up was an 8-man tournament. It was called UFC 1 War of the Worlds. And in this tournament, it was advertised as no holds barred. Each fighter would come in, fight someone else. They had 15 minutes to either knock someone out, submit them. If at the end of that 15 minutes, none of those had happened, it would go to a scorecard. If you won, you advanced to the next round. The winner of the fight would receive $50,000 and be considered the best fighter in the world. At the end of this, Rory and Grayson was in the finals, and Gracie won. He was considered the best fighter in the world at the time. And that was going to be the end of it, all said and done. But SCG was so impressed with their pay-per-view sales that they decided to do more. That first pay-per-view sold 86,000. Most wrestling at the time, WCW and WWF, was not even doing those sales. So it was very impressive, and it's kind of how the UFC got its start. The UFC became very popular. It started to expand and was ending up in most homes during their pay-per-views. However, it was advertised as no holds barred. And this no holds barred meant basically human cockfighting. And politicians and many people that were important was opposed to this, and it was becoming a huge deal in the public's eye, the human cockfighting, and this put a lot of pressure on SEG and the UFC. So they almost had to declare bankruptcy. Their sales started going down extremely for pay-per-views. It was just a dark, dark day for the UFC. They lost all their pay-per-views. No one would sign them anymore because they knew it would get so much pressure from Congress and the government. So the UFC was in a downward spiral, and it really was not looking good for the company until about early 2001. In January 2001, the Fertitta brothers and Dana White realized that this had much potential as they were all in the mixed martial arts world. And they decided they would buy the company for $2 million. They bought the company for $2 million in January of 2001. However, they realized that there's still many challenges right now. These are still dark days, and just because we bought the company, it does not mean that sales are going to go up and that it's okay. The UFC was not commissioned or allowed with the Nevada State Athletic Commission or the New Jersey State Athletic Commission. They were not allowed to do any events, and these were all the events should be happening. So they knew they needed to make some changes. So what did the UFC do to make changes and make it what it is today? They started implementing rules. The first thing they did is create weight classes, and they went away from the tournament style. They decided to do weight classes to keep things fair and more even. They created 3 5-minute rounds, and championship bouts had 5 5-minute rounds. This brought rules and structure to the sport. They also allowed no stomping or kicks to a downed opponent. This was huge, as this is the things that allowed them to get commissioned with Nevada and New Jersey. So now they could start doing events, and that's what they did. They started putting on pay-per-views again, and it started to hype back up. But it just wasn't quite at that level where it could be or what it is today. So in 2005, Zuffa, which is the banner that the UFC is under, signed a deal with Spike Television. Spike Television decided they would allow them to do a reality TV show. The TV show is called The Ultimate Fighter, and it's what it is a bunch of fighters, 16 fighters particularly, living in a house together. They live together, they eat together, they sleep together, they train together. And during this, there's a small in-house tournament going on. And the winner of that tournament, whoever won all these fights, will get a contract to the UFC and be considered the Ultimate Fighter winner. The fighter would receive a six-figure contract. This was aired on television in 2005 and ended up being one of the biggest reality TV shows of all times. It was a huge success, and it really turned around what the UFC is known as today, and it made it a mainstream event. The UFC is the most popular sport in the world today, and it is growing extremely fast, and that can be thanks to MMA and the Ultimate Fighter. Now, they went through their dark days. It was invented by the Gracies. They had their dark days, but all of that made it is what it is today. It brought the structure to the sport, and that's why it's so famous. That's the history of the Ultimate Fighting Championship.